What if the boats that could shut down one of the world's busiest shipping lanes are hiding inside a mountain, right now, waiting for the order to move? That's not a guess. That's confirmed. And this week, the US military went straight after them. Before we get into what actually happened, hit that like button, tap subscribe, and send this to the one friend who always asks you, wait, is that actually real or is that just internet talk? Because this one is real, and I'm going to show you exactly how we know. Let's set the scene properly, because a lot of people jumping into this story right now have missed the last few months entirely, and without that background, none of this makes sense. Back in late February of this year, the United States and Israel launched a joint operation against Iran that changed the entire region overnight. Iran's supreme leader was killed in that opening strike, along with several senior commanders. Iran called it an act of war. The US and Israel called it a preemptive strike to stop a much bigger threat before it could happen. Within hours, missiles were flying in both directions. Within days, this had become the biggest open conflict the Middle East had seen in a generation. Now here's the part that matters for today's story specifically. In the weeks after that opening strike, American and Israeli air power went hard after Iran's navy. Ports got hit, bases got hit, ships got sunk in harbor before they ever had a chance to leave. If you looked at satellite photos from March, you'd think Iran's ability to fight at sea had basically been wiped out, but it wasn't. And the reason why is the whole point of this video. See, Iran knew decades ago that it could never build a navy that could go toe-to-toe with the United States. Big warships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, that's simply not a fight Iran could win, and their military planners knew it. So instead of trying to match American firepower, they built something completely different. Thousands of small, fast, cheap attack boats, boats that cost almost nothing compared to a frigate, boats that can carry missiles or torpedoes, boats that are hard to spot, hard to track, and easy to replace if you lose one. And here's the genius part, the part that should genuinely impress you even if you have no interest in military strategy. Iran didn't just build these boats, they built homes for them, along the rocky southern coastline, and on a handful of strategic islands sitting right inside the Strait of Hormuz. Iran spent years carving tunnels and caves directly into the mountains. Real hidden harbors built into solid rock where these fast boats could sit protected, refuel, rearm, and launch again within minutes. From the air, from space, from a warship's radar, it just looks like empty coastline. Rock, cliffs, nothing to see. And then a hidden opening appears, and boats pour out toward the shipping lanes before anyone even has time to react. This is why, months into this war, after the US destroyed most of Iran's visible navy, officials were still talking about Iranian fast boats as an active threat. Because the ships you can see on satellite imagery aren't the ships that matter most here. The ones tucked away inside a mountain are. Now let's talk about what's actually happened in just the past month, because this is where the title of this video comes from, and I want to walk you through it carefully because there's a difference between what's confirmed and what people online are exaggerating. In early July, after Iranian forces struck several commercial vessels near Oman, U.S. Central Command launched a massive response. Public statements confirm the U.S. hit more than 80 separate targets across southern Iran in a single operation: air defense systems, command centers, coastal radar, anti-ship missile sites, and, according to CENTCOM's own numbers, more than 60 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fast attack boats, many of them in or near the very islands we're talking about: Qeshm Island, Bandar Abbas, a coastal town called Sirik. These are the exact locations that analysts have pointed to for years as the heart of Iran's hidden boat network. That wasn't a one-time event either. Through the middle of July, CENTCOM carried out additional rounds of strikes, each one described publicly as bigger than the last. One U.S. official told reporters that a mid-July strike was 4 to 5 times larger in scope than the operation that came before it. Iranian state media reported explosions at Qeshm and at Kish Island, another location tied to Iran's coastal military presence, and Iran's own semi-official news agency reported multiple blasts at Sirik in a single night. On the American side, CENTCOM confirmed it was targeting coastal surveillance systems, missile storage, and maritime strike capability specifically to reduce Iran's ability to threaten ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz. And then, just recently, after Iran attempted a strike on American forces in the region, the U.S. hit back again. This time, CENTCOM described the operation as a powerful response, striking military command centers, missile and drone facilities, coastal surveillance sites, and what officials called maritime capabilities. Explosions were reported across an unusually wide stretch of the coast this time: Bushehr, Kish Island, Ahwaz, Qeshm Island again. One U.S. official called the scale of that night's bombing roughly double the size of the strike before it. So if you're watching this and thinking, wait, didn't they already destroy most of Iran's navy back in March? You're right to be confused, and that confusion is exactly why this story deserves a real breakdown instead of a 5-second headline. The big ships were mostly dealt with early. What's kept dragging on, month after month, strike after strike, is this harder problem: getting to boats that aren't sitting in open water where you can see them, but hidden inside carved-out rock, sometimes with reinforced doors, sometimes with more than one hidden entrance, built specifically to survive exactly the kind of bombing campaign that's been running against them for months. If this kind of story is exactly why you keep coming back to this channel, do me a favor right now. Tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this conflict is still moving, and I'm not going to let you miss the next update by accident. Let's talk about why these hideouts have been so incredibly hard to fully knock out, because this is genuinely one of the toughest problems in modern warfare, and understanding it will change how you see every future headline about this war. Picture solid rock, sometimes hundreds of meters thick, standing between a bomb and its target. That's not a wall that collapses the way a building does. That's natural armor, built by the planet itself over millions of years, and no amount of modern engineering makes punching through that easy. To actually destroy a facility like this, you need specialized bunker-busting weapons designed to bury deep before they explode. You need very precise intelligence on where the internal chambers actually are, because if you just crater the entrance without touching what's inside, the boats are still sitting there safe, ready to roll out again the moment repairs are made. And even then, if a base has multiple entrances, which many of these do by design, sealing one doorway doesn't mean the facility is finished. It might just mean the boats leave from a different opening a few days later. This is the entire logic behind why Iran built these bases carved into mountains instead of simple boat sheds on the beach. A boat shed gets flattened in a single pass, a mountain doesn't. Iran's military planners understood that a bombing campaign against hardened, hidden, spread-out infrastructure like this becomes slow, expensive, and frustrating for whoever's trying to shut it down, even with total air superiority. And that's exactly what we're watching play out right now, strike after strike, week after week, against a threat that keeps surviving because of where it's hiding. There's a tactic that makes these boats especially dangerous once they do come out, and it's worth understanding because it explains why the US and its allies take this threat so seriously, even though these are individually tiny boats compared to a warship. It's called swarming. Instead of one boat trying to fight a warship directly, which it would lose badly, dozens of small boats launch from scattered hidden locations at the same time and converge on a single target from multiple directions at once. Some carry missiles, some carry torpedoes. The goal isn't to win a fair fight. The goal is to overwhelm a ship's defenses through sheer numbers and unpredictability, coming from angles a crew can't watch all at once. There's actual footage from years before this war even started showing Iranian fast boats practicing exactly this kind of formation near a U.S. destroyer, closing distance from several directions while warnings went out over the radio. That's not a theoretical threat. That's a rehearsed one. Now, I want to be honest with you about something, because I think a lot of coverage online right now is overselling what's actually confirmed, and I'd rather you hear the accurate version from me than get excited about a headline that isn't quite true. What is confirmed from CENTCOM's own public statements and from multiple independent outlets is that the U.S. has repeatedly and heavily struck the military infrastructure surrounding these coastal hideouts: missile sites, radar, command centers, surface boats caught out in the open, dozens of confirmed fast attack craft destroyed. What I have not seen confirmed anywhere, not from CENTCOM, not from any outlet doing serious reporting, is a specific claim that American forces have actually breached or collapsed the hardened tunnel systems themselves, the actual carved-out rock where boats shelter deep inside the mountain. That distinction matters. Hitting the coastline around these hideouts hard is very real and very confirmed. Claiming the underground bunkers themselves have been cracked open is a much bigger claim, and right now it isn't one the public record actually supports. If you see someone stating that with total confidence, I'd treat it with real skepticism until it's actually confirmed by more than one source. There's also a human cost to all of this that's easy to lose track of when you're just watching strike footage and reading numbers off a screen. This isn't happening in some completely empty military zone far from ordinary life. These coastal areas have towns, workers, families living nearby. Reports coming out of Iran describe civilian casualties from these waves of strikes, including people with no connection at all to military operations. That doesn't erase the military significance of these targets. It just means this story isn't purely a hardware story, and it shouldn't be treated like one. Let's zoom out for a second, because there's a bigger piece of this puzzle that a lot of people miss entirely. Strikes are only half of the pressure campaign running against Iran right now. The other half is a naval blockade, and honestly, it might matter even more in the long run than any single bombing run. Since the U.S. reinstated a blockade on Iranian ports, the economic damage has been staggering. Billions of dollars in lost oil revenue, hundreds of millions more draining away every single day the blockade continues, hitting an economy that was already strained from years of sanctions before this war even started. Ships have been intercepted, some have been seized outright, and yes, some vessels have still managed to slip through, because no blockade is ever completely airtight, but the overall bleeding is real and it's constant. So picture the full picture Iran is dealing with right now. Direct military strikes hammering its coastline and its hidden boat network on one side, a massive economic chokehold slowly draining its resources on the other. Both pressure campaigns running at the same time, clearly designed to work together toward the same outcome, ending Iran's ability to threaten one of the most important waterways on the planet. And here's the wrinkle that makes this whole story genuinely more interesting than a simple good guys, bad guys headline. Destroying most of Iran's visible navy back in the opening weeks of this war did not stop Iran from continuing to threaten the Strait of Hormuz afterward. Analysts who track this conflict closely have pointed out that Iran's big conventional ships were never really the core of this threat in the first place. The real disruptive power was always sitting in those hidden coastal bunkers, in boats too small and too well hidden to easily wipe out from the air. Which means sinking the expensive, visible warships back in March, as dramatic as that looked on camera, barely touched the actual capability that's kept this fight going for months since. There's one more layer worth mentioning before we get to what this all actually means, because it connects directly to everything we've just walked through. Iran hasn't just been protecting fast boats inside these coastal bases. There's also serious mine-laying capability tied up in the same infrastructure, and mines are a genuinely underrated threat in naval warfare. Unlike a missile, a mine doesn't need a crew standing by or continuous guidance. It can sit quietly in a shipping lane for weeks, waiting. Clearing mines safely and thoroughly is slow, careful, dangerous work, and it's exactly the kind of operation that becomes even more dangerous when the area you're trying to clear is defended by hidden fast boats capable of swarming in from multiple directions. Even in a scenario where the fighting stopped tomorrow, that lingering threat wouldn't just disappear. It would take real time, real risk, and real resources to fully clear. Before we get to the ending, here's your third and final reminder, and I'm going to do this one differently. Drop a comment right now, just one word, coastline, if you made it this far, because I want to see how many of you actually stuck with the full story instead of skipping to the end. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think, and I read every single one. So where does this actually leave us? If you strip away the dramatic headlines and just look at what's confirmed, here's the honest picture. Iran spent roughly 2 decades building a defensive system specifically designed to survive exactly the kind of overwhelming air campaign it's facing right now. Hidden fast boats tucked inside hardened coastal caves. A layered doctrine built entirely around the idea that you don't need to win a fair fight against a bigger military, you just need to make sure that military can never fully finish the job. And months into one of the most intense bombing campaigns this region has seen in a generation, with dozens of confirmed strikes hitting the coastline around these hideouts again and again, that system is still functioning. Not untouched, not unscathed, genuinely damaged, in fact, with confirmed destruction of dozens of boats and major infrastructure, but not eliminated either. That's not a satisfying, clean ending, and I know that. There's no single dramatic moment here where you can say, that's it, it's over, one side clearly won. What we're actually watching is something slower and, honestly, more historically realistic. Sustained pressure against infrastructure that was built on purpose to be incredibly hard to fully destroy. And if history is any guide, conflicts like this one rarely end with one perfect knockout strike. They tend to wind down slowly through some mix of exhaustion, economic pressure, and quiet diplomatic movement happening in the background while the strikes keep making headlines up front. And maybe that's the real lesson buried inside this whole story. It's not really about boats or caves or bombs at all, not at its core. It's about what happens when a smaller power refuses to fight the fight everyone expects it to fight and builds something patient and hidden instead, something designed to outlast the headlines rather than win a single dramatic battle. Whether you think that strategy is admirable engineering or something far darker depends entirely on which side of this war you're watching it from. But either way, understanding it is the difference between actually knowing what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now and just reacting to whatever title happens to trend today. I'll keep tracking this one closely because it isn't finished, not even close. The moment there's something new and properly confirmed, coastal bunkers actually breached, a serious diplomatic breakthrough, anything that changes this picture, I'll bring it to you straight, sourced properly, without the exaggeration. Until then, stay sharp, stay skeptical of anything promising an instant total victory, and I'll see you in the next one.